So surrounding yourself with the right friends and the tribe when that imposter syndrome creeps in is super important.
Yeah. It goes both ways. I very much call her at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, I know this. Okay, guys, so real talk. We all have our voice, but some of us are still figuring out what ours even sounds like. There's the voice we use in group chats, the ones we use in a pitch meeting, and the one that we always hear in our head that's like, girl, maybe don't say that, don't post that. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we even wonder if anyone actually wants to hear what we have to say. Spoiler alert, they really, really do, but more on that later. I'm here today with Sabina and Rahat, 2 women who've used their voices to build something incredibly meaningful for themselves and for the communities around them. Before Sabina's skincare empire as founder of Baréskin, and before Rahat's editorial leadership in Beyond the Boardroom, Esquire, and Campaign Asia, they each started somewhere extremely personal. So today isn't about how to build your personal brand or how to optimize your LinkedIn presence. It's about something that's way messier and just honestly way more interesting. It's about the slightly chaotic act of how when you say stuff out loud, it actually becomes the blueprint for who you turn out to be. So welcome to Summit, guys. Want to say hi?
Hello.
Thank you, Michelle. What a beautiful introduction.
Okay, so let's go back, right? And just go straight to it. No titles, no job titles, no LinkedIn, just you guys. What was your early voice like? And maybe even talk about what was the first time you said something publicly that maybe felt a little too real, but was what made the most sense for you?
I have always had a voice, I think, to the detriment of my parents. It has been loud and vocal since I was very, very little. So I'm not surprised at all that I ended up in a space where I need to now leverage that voice, be it all in a different medium. To me, I think where I first realized that I wanted to say something meaningful was probably high school. That was my kind of profound awakening of realizing how powerful it is when you actually do articulate what you feel and how you think, and also use that as a way to build community and influence positive change. I was a very focused and academic child, but I also really enjoyed charity work. I really enjoyed philanthropy. I enjoyed community building. That was a huge element of what brought me personal joy. So all through high school, I did public speaking, I did debating, and it was the effect of seeing what you had to say have shape on the narrative of how people thought, even as a child, that made me realize, oh my gosh, there's a lot here to unpack that I could potentially, as I get educated, as I grow in awareness, I will realize how to leverage this in a much more useful way. But the first time I think I ever really used that in a way that was in a public forum was when I first started blogging, and that was in my early 20s. And I used it primarily to voice my concerns and frustrations around modern dating. A very far cry from what I'm doing now, but it was kind of the building block of what I realized, okay, there's a lot of commonality and relatability in what people are feeling, and perhaps I can be the one to amplify that in a group.
Love that. Sabina?
For me, I think growing up, I was not vocal at all. I was very shy and always tried to blend in the background, kind of. And the first time I made a public comment or anything that was public facing was after I had my 3rd kid. So I had 3 kids before 30, and everything around me, everyone was talking about how amazing motherhood is and how this is what I'm meant to be and what I'm meant to do. So my first post that I did, it was on a Facebook blog, where I said, wait a minute, it's not as, hunky-dory as everyone's making out to be. And as soon as I pressed post, I was like, it could hit really wrongly. And everyone's watching, my in-laws, my parents, my sisters. Oh. So, but I had to say it. I felt this need to, it was almost for myself. It was almost therapeutic to say what's on my mind and then see where it takes me. So that was my first post. It was on a Facebook blog, which I had started.
So you are very much building your own personal story on a personal platform. Mm-hmm. So how did that turn into a little business venture, a little a venture? Because it's just so, it starts with somewhere so close to you and so personal.
Yes.
At which point did you decide okay, I've got something different to say, and I'm gonna say it.
At that time, this was about 10 years ago when I started talking about motherhood in my voice, and everything around us, the content that was coming out was very aspirational. There were content creators that were mums, but it was extremely aspirational. Everything was perfect. The products that they were using was perfect. The skin, the kids were very well behaved. Like, it was all very aspirational and very curated content. So as soon as I started talking about things that, like, I've had a really crazy night and I need an under eye bag cream, and this is one that just I found at Watson's and it works for me. As soon as I started talking in a very real tone, it resonated with the moms that were reading, and including cousins and school friends that I had lost in touch with. And they're like, oh my God, this is how I feel right now as well. And it just grew, that community. And I think motherhood is such a bond that people, once you get into that bond of sharing, it's a very close-knit bond. And as soon as I hit about 40,000 followers at that time, which was a big deal because it was an organic kind of platform with no paid content, that's when I started thinking, hey, people are resonating with what I'm doing. And when I started dabbling with skincare and doing things with products, I was already modifying the products that I was bringing home from the store before I use it. So as I was documenting it, the response was incredible. I loved how people were so involved, and they're like, hey, can you make this concoction for us as well? And that's how it all started. It was very organic. It was never meant to be a business. It was just meant to be something that I do for myself and my kids and their eczema issues that they were having. But the response really encouraged me. And I had friends in the retail industry who used my concoctions and said, hey, can you not just have it in the store? And I was like, I don't have a label. I don't have a website. So that's how it kind of just started. It was just out of necessity. And then the encouragement of my community really made me, take it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's fascinating is like, this is 10 years ago. Like, today we're all about realness. Like, we're all about like the real shit, like really raw. We complain, like we bitch. But like 10 years ago, yes, like there was that, we need to be perfect even though we're not, and we're sweating buckets, but like we need to like get our shit together and like just look so like polished. Was that also the same thing that you were feeling when you were writing those blogs? Like, because yours also are really like personal stories that you're putting out there. Cracks me up. I read it sometimes.
Thank you. It was so interesting because when I first started writing, I was working full-time in corporate. And so I had to really balance the image of being a corporate person with the writing that I was doing, which was very raw and personal, unfiltered, and a glimpse into my personal life because it was related to being a 20-something-year-old trying to navigate the very tumultuous world of dating, sometimes dating within the corporate environment at work, which you then obviously had to make sure that you didn't want anyone else at work to know about what was happening. And I think I chose dating because I was always a very romantic person by nature. I grew up surrounded by fairy tales. My parents allowed me to be very whimsical. And so to me, it became this pursuit of what I thought I was supposed to do. I was like, you're in your 20s, you're meant to have fun, you're meant to find the love of your life, you're meant to marry the dream man, you're meant to do all these things. And by virtue of that, I was also meant to do all of the things I was doing in corporate. I was meant to get a great job. I was meant to work in a prestigious firm and leverage my education for that. And so it's interesting because I didn't find authenticity in myself until I truly decided that I didn't need to have a veneer anymore because I didn't need to be corporate Rahat and then personal Rahat. Like, I could be both things at once and giving myself permission for that. When I was younger, I wrote fervorously. I started freelance writing at the age of 15, gave it up because I thought that I potentially couldn't make a career out of it because the creative industry is a very difficult industry to break into, particularly from a journalistic point of view, growing up in Australia and feeling, because we had migrated to Australia, and so I'm not natively from there. And at that time, I was 5-7 years old in the country in the sense that like we had only lived there for that long. So I didn't know how to navigate the media landscape. So this was a safety that I gave myself. And so I think for me, it was finding authenticity, and I know that word is like so overused, but maybe the better way I can say it is finding self-acceptance around the different dichotomies of how I saw myself was actually truly when I moved to Singapore. And I entered the creative industry in advertising. And even though I was still a corporate persona. By virtue of the environment that I was in, which was inherently creative, because I was in a creative agency, I then allowed myself to feel like I was allowed to have different facets to my personality. And that really is the point. But I spent 8 years getting to that place.
And would you say like the voice that you have today, the words that are coming from you, whether in like a public persona or a private one, like this is that final form?
Oh no, not at all. I hope not. I hope not because I'm not proud of my voice. But I hope not because I haven't yet learned all the things I want to learn, and I haven't grown in all the ways I wish to grow. And I haven't yet used my voice for the things that I truly want to use it for. Because to me, as much as I love the sound of my own voice and hearing myself speak, I think that truly the gift of having a voice, because I do believe it is that. I think everybody has a voice, but it's not necessarily vocalized in the way that I'm a speaker and that's my passion, and I'm a writer, and so my voice comes out in those formats. But unfortunately or fortunately, society is geared towards those mechanisms of amplification. So to me, it's like, I would love to use my platform, my influence, my voice, whatever I have in whatever form, whether it's in this shape, whether it grows larger, which I hope it does because it will have more impact, to instill a sense of change in the things that I feel passionate about, and which is about people and bringing them together and allowing them to connect and radiating a sense of positivity in the world, and not in a way that doesn't feel tangible, but truly like showing people that you can pursue your dreams, you can have non-linear careers, nothing is too difficult, you can come from a non-traditional background and achieve what you want to achieve. Those are the key things that I still want to use my voice for. And so I don't think I'm anywhere near final form at the moment.
I wanna push that a bit deeper. So you've obviously lived like multiple lives, like you said it yourself, you've done different things, held different jobs, like moved cities, countries, to both of you, right? From your consulting job to the agency world, and then now publishing, how has your own relationship with your voice evolved as you moved like between these very different worlds? Because like you said, like there's a responsibility there is that level of connection with the communities, and you move through them like, so it seems to me so seamlessly through it all. Like how do you what's that relationship like?
I love how seamless it can look from the outside at times, but truly it's been an expedition of overcoming self-doubt at every juncture. I think one of the things that people who appear high achieving from the outset don't acknowledge enough on public platforms is just how difficult it is mentally to push through the barriers that constitute that quote unquote achievement, because achievement is by someone else's standards. It's not necessarily by your own. If you asked me on a good day, I would say, yes, I feel like it was seamless. I managed to navigate all the different challenges that come with transitioning or rising sideways. Actually, there's someone that I used to work with, fantastic person named Rika Facundo, who's now at Walk. And she always says you can rise sideways. And I think that's what my career has been a testament to. But it's really interesting because I think the thing that's defined each of those experiences is not that I have not doubted myself, not that I haven't felt immense fear every single time I've had to take a pivot, but I think there's an undercurrent of passion and true identity that has been kind of like my pull through rope, where even when I felt myself tugging against the desire to change, it's kind of almost like this innate sense of self that was like, no, I won't let you stop. I won't let you give up at this point. And it takes a lot of self-trust to start listening to that voice, because initially you think it's almost sabotaging you because you're like, but why? I'm doing well in this particular space, or this is what society wants from me. And I'm in a great position. I work for a great firm. I've worked for some of the world's biggest management consultancies. And that made me feel so happy. And I remember having an existential crisis the first time I left consulting, because I suddenly lost the ability to influence C-suite. And I just went, what's my worth if I can't sit in a room with a CEO anymore and tell them how to think? And I moved into PR and communications, where there was already an excess of women, number one. And I went from being in a male dominated environment, being often the only woman in the room, which in itself was challenging, but also allowed me to have a unique platform because my perspective would often then get drawn into from a different lens. But to me, it was like becoming then part of the mix of this industry where there were a lot of other people that already existed and feeling special enough. And that is just one of the most debilitating feelings because you go, oh, I've lost this title, I've lost this prestige, I have to navigate this. How am I going to do that? And then slowly realizing that it's not about the prestige, it's about who you are, and you can still make it and still be impactful. And it's not the title that gives you that. It's not without self-doubt, but I would say to anyone who feels like they can't transition between careers, find the thread that connects you. And for me, that thread was always my passion for storytelling. So I just needed to tell the stories I needed to tell. And that eventually led me to this point.
I really like that's so impactful and empowering. Like I'm trying to think like what's the thread that connects me? Do you know what's the thread that connects you?
For me, it's always been, I think storytelling, yes, is a big part of a lot of the work that we three of us do, but also building a community that feels authentic to you and your tribe. And I feel like that has been something that's pulled me through a lot of my career challenges and even challenges with Baréskin. I feel like at the moment my North Star is very clear to me. That's when I perform my best.
Yeah. The whole point of like society having an expectation for like how you should show up and like literally what you should say, I think it's a very real thing because we all work in industries where everyone is supposed to have a very distinct voice. But what is that distinct voice? Like, how do you find the thing that only you can say and only you can say the best? I think for me, like, that is what I really spend a lot of time figuring out. When we started Saya, like, we wanted to do like a whole podcast like this and like write columns, but it's always at the back of my head. I'm thinking like, there's already so much content out there. What can I say and like, what can I contribute that makes it like even more meaningful and impactful and think like that for me is the barometer, right? For the type of content that we like put out and like things that we say. But okay, so like this is gonna sound really weird, but have you ever now thinking about all the things that you've said, published or posted, you've gone and done it and then, but like a couple years later or a couple months later, you read it back and you go like, wow, I didn't know I thought that way. Right? So when did your own voice start teaching you things about yourself, whether how much you've grown or how much you've changed or how much you've remained like you're constant like through it all?
You want to take that?
Sure. For me, it's really interesting reading my early writing back, whether it's the blog that I started out writing, which I sometimes cringe reading back, only because I see a version of myself in that blog that it still exists deep within me, which is this very hopeful, self-willing, girl who wanted to truly, truly fall in love, but also documented because it felt very Sex and the City, and which I was obsessed with living that life. I wanted to be the corporate Cinderella, as you can kind of imagine, and I read that writing and I see a lot of earnestness in it, and that makes me not want to say anything terrible to myself when I read it. But I feel like it wasn't truly perhaps fair to myself because it was only a facet of who I am. And I felt like I didn't have the authority to speak in other spaces yet because I was so junior in my career. I was in consulting, but I was an analyst, which is like a starting position, right? And I didn't feel like I'd earned the right to speak about leadership or earned the right to speak about business or anything. So I was like, what have I earned the right to speak about? Well, my personal experiences, and growing up, in an immigrant family, it is a thing that you think about, which is what can I say on a public platform that will also feel like I'm not going against the values of how I've been raised and what I've been taught. And so dating was an interesting one because it was the first time that I put a part of myself out there that my parents also didn't really get to know very much about unless they then read the platform and bringing them into that. And as I've evolved as a writer, when I think about when I first joined Bureau, I see flashes of that youth and, the kind of immaturity of how I expressed my true thoughts. Not that my thoughts were immature, but just in that my skill was. And then I look at Esquire and I see so much growth in how much I learned along the way. And that was a really unique experience because I wanted to perform for a certain audience to prove credibility. Again, because I entered the men's fashion space where everybody sort of felt like, but wait a second, you've never worked in men's fashion. You've never been the editor-in-chief of a luxury publication. So what gives you, again, this sense of authority? And I think that what we were talking about prior about moving between careers, there is a real imposter syndrome that accompanies that, because some people will see it as, wow, that's fantastic. You can move from this to that and you're a kind of a chameleon of sorts. Other people see it as, well, are you quite shallow in your skill set because you never developed depth in any particular space? And that carries through in the voice that you then use to channel, because at the back of your head, when you're writing something, you ask yourself, do I truly have the authority to write this? And do I truly have the credibility? And that's so, now I realize how performative that is, because I have the authority by virtue of the fact that I have lived the experience of many of those things. Not to say that you have to have lived and done everything to write about it, because that's going against journalism as a virtue. But I do think that you shouldn't negate your own experience as part of your credibility. You know, I always thought you need external validation before you're allowed to have a powerful voice. But I think that validation comes from the fact that I've learned a lot. So when I look at my writing now, I think still I have much room to grow. And there are some amazing writers in Singapore that I really look up to. And I wish I can get my voice and my vocabulary to emulate some of the way in which they express themselves. But is this the truest form of how I've written based on my own personal feelings and thoughts and values? Yes, this is as authentic as I've ever been.
It's interesting that you say authority, because I am, like, one of the questions that I had was, right now you're in all of your editorial roles, right? Like even the stuff that you're doing with Beyond the Boardroom, you're always making decisions on what stories matter, what voices to amplify, like who to highlight, who to feature. And I think that's big responsibility and privilege. So has being the one that is collecting, curating all of these different perspectives, like, changed your understanding of that authority, understanding of that responsibility as you've grown now? Like, how is it that you think about what stories to tell and who to feature?
It is. It's an immense privilege. And I do think that at times, those of us who work in the field of media, we become very accustomed to having access to important people and celebrities and leaders and global figures. And we forget that there's a responsibility that accompanies that pen, right? Like they always say, the pen is mightier than the sword. And I really, truly do believe that, because I've seen people's lives be completely shaped by what gets written about them. And I will never forget that there was a story that I was investigating maybe a year or two ago in my prior role. And it was regarding the nature of some misconduct that had occurred, alleged misconduct that had occurred in a particular space. And I remember speaking to someone who was a source and saying that I would like to clarify whether or not the following incidents did occur, because I'm going to write about it. And this is a very senior person who was at the very top of their career at this point in time. Wow. And they said to me, what you write is going to determine what happens to my life. Because if you publish this and without knowing the full context of it, it can ruin everything I've built and I will never get employed again. And this is someone who was at the very top. I'm talking C-suite in a very reputable place. And they said, I don't want to tell you not to write it, but I want to implore that you at least give me the time and space to explain my side of the story. And they actually took the time to explain to me what the implications would be on other projects, on their life, on their family, because of the platform that we had and how influential it was in the particular industry that we were in. And it really, not that I didn't ever take it seriously, but it gave me so much pause in that moment that it made me recognize that if you don't narrate and curate the right way, you have the potential to be part of the problem, which is the very thing that true journalists are trying to fight against, which is misinformation. If you become a proponent of misinformation because it's easier to get clicks and likes, because you feel a sense of external validation because your story got shared more times because you had a great headline that baited people into clicking into it, yes, you get the dopamine hit of being socially relevant. But beyond that point, you have actually dented into, I would say, or sort of unraveled a thread in the fabric of trust that you should have if you're a media person. And that responsibility is immense. And in the world that we live in today, from a political standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from a diplomatic standpoint, and from a social standpoint, if you are in this field and you don't take that responsibility seriously, then you really need to ask yourself why you're doing what you do.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think like that's kind of the same for you, because creating Baréskin meant taking a very public stance on beauty standards, on clean beauty, and on what women in the region specifically need. So when you first started talking about these beliefs like publicly, and like what drove you to create these products, and how you were taking feedback from the women that were using it, the people in your own lives, did it clarify something about your own values that maybe wasn't entirely formed before?
Yes, I think being vulnerable on a platform like this that has so many opinions and people's eyeballs on it, it really makes you think that, yes, I can be vulnerable, but then there's also this repercussion of other women looking up to this or reading this and forming their opinions as well, and also reflecting on how they're feeling at such a time when they've just had a baby or they're just in the midst of their difficult pregnancy. So it is an immense responsibility. But if as long as I'm being authentic to myself and all of these products that I'm using on me and my children, if I think it's good enough for me and my kids, then it's something that I'm very comfortable putting out there. The way testing happens in the skincare industry is usually very technical and within focus groups that you have no idea who these people are. But the way we do it in Baréskin is it's tested on myself and on my kids, and I have a focus group that I know very well. We track them on a very at a level where it's very intimate. Like I speak to them every day. They have a chart where they clock in the way they're feeling, how their skin is reacting, things like that. So, and all of this is documented for everyone to see and follow along in our journey, which I feel is what makes my voice unique. I think having them follow along with the journey that I'm on, and the good, the bad, the highs, the lows. There are some products that never made it into the market because it just didn't cut it. And my followers have seen that. My community has seen that, oh, this was a product I tried, tested, the focus group tried it, but we never saw it come out. It's not on the website. Why? And so all of these facets, I think, make this brand as much as it's mine, it's also belongs to the community. They were involved in the shade of gray I used on my logo. They've been involved in the color of the lid that I used because I kept them along in the journey. And as long as community feels that they have been seen and heard and felt, they really show up for you and the brand that you create. And the authenticity factor, I know it's a word that's been overused, but being authentic to yourself and your brand and your voice and being consistent in that. It's not like I can be authentic for one season and then I forget, I just go with the flow and just forget about being consistency in this industry and also in media in general. If there's a voice you're curating, being consistent is really underrated, but that's exactly what hits the right note with the community you're trying to build.
There's a moment where you've got your first thousands of followers, when people start actually listening beyond your immediate circles, beyond your immediate communities. When your audience starts to grow, when your opinion actually starts to matter to someone. What was the moment you realized this, each of you? Because your journeys have been so personal, and the stories that you're telling, it's really more than just words, it's more than just content. You actually have got impact to someone's lives, their careers, how they show up. How did that shift feel for you? And did it change what you were willing to say?
I look back reflectively and I can recognize that there were lots of micro moments. I think my own folly has been that I've been waiting for a macro moment to be like, now my voice matters. Because in all honesty and truth, as I sit here with you today, I still wonder whether my voice matters. And I say that really without eliciting any sympathy or feeling like this is coming from a place of self-doubt. I think it's because, like I said prior, if you really truly want to leverage your voice for change, you wonder whether how much change is enough, how many people resonate, how will it reach you. You put yourself against these kind of impossible metrics when you want to see whether your voice has truly reverberated across the spaces that you wish it would. But having said that, I think the first instance I ever felt it was, I go back to when I was 15 and I was interning at one of Australia's largest newspapers, and I had snuck out of the back because I'd accompanied a reporter to a event.
As you do.
As you do. It was work experience. It was mandatory. I was 15. I still remember. And we had gone to a lecture that was being given by an ex-Guantanamo Bay detainee. And they said that he's not going to take any questions because he doesn't want to have the back and forth and, with the media, because obviously there was a deep sense of distrust. He was put into Guantanamo Bay actually incorrectly, and then he was released as a consequence of that eventually. So he was giving a talk at a university about his experience. And in that moment, I sort of realized, no, but I really want to tell this story. And so how do I do that? So the only people he was willing to speak to were students. So I actually, when he went outside to have a cigarette, I went outside and I said to him, like, I'm no threat to you. I'm just a student, but I would really like to have a conversation with you. And we had a conversation where I asked him a set of questions. And I remember going back to my editor at the time and just saying, look, I managed to get some insights from him. And they were like, but how? Because he didn't speak to anyone. And I said, yeah, but I just told him I'm a student. And then he wanted to talk to me. We put together this article. It went out. And I was really, really expecting something negative to come from that. And instead, it became the opening of my journalistic career, because someone was like, I don't know how you got this piece of information when he wasn't actively speaking. And I think as a 15-year-old girl, I was like, oh, wait, do I have a little bit of power here in that? How did I get this information? How did my mind decide that this was the right thing to do? But that was probably my first kind of awakening to it. But the thing that reminds me the most about it is actually every single time I interview someone, or every single time I message somebody to say, I would really like to do a story with you, it's the pure, unfiltered joy on someone, as long as obviously it's a positive story. It doesn't happen when I'm like, I need to investigate what you've done. But I think it's the pure, unfiltered joy of telling somebody I would love to speak to you, because I think our biggest pursuit as human beings is to be seen and loved for who we are, whether that's in a business context or in a personal context or anything. And in that moment, for that 5 seconds that I tell them, they feel truly the most seen. And so therefore, whether or not that article ends up reaching 5 million people, which I would love for it to, or it reaches the 5 people in their family, the joy that they feel in having that tangible thing in their hand, even if it's digital, to say, my story got told, I got seen, that is when my voice matters, because I made that happen for someone else. That is the greatest thing that keeps me pursuing using the platform to do more.
Yeah. I think I might interject a bit, because for me, the voice here is the voice I have in the business world of Baréskin. So we live in Asia, where we're surrounded by very economical options to use in our products. It's very easy to take the cheaper way into ingredients or packaging, but then I have this trust that I've built, and I would never do anything to kind of mar that trust. So when I'm in business meetings where we're talking about using a lower quality ingredient or a lower quality packaging, or using reusable kind of plastics that we have in the tester products and stuff like that, where the carbon footprint would really be very destructible. So there is when I pause and say, look, this matters, and we will spend these dollars because this is something that a mother is using on their child or a pregnant woman is using on their skin. So that, for me, I feel like that my voice in meetings like this, even though the team gets exasperated and they're like, we're next to China, like we could easily source this for like half the cost, but I have to pause and say, I'm sorry, I know it does not make business sense, but I cannot do anything to tamper on the trust that I've built over the years of communicating and putting myself out there, because that's a scary thought. The moment you lose that trust, the momentum, and it's very hard to come back from that.
But that's something about you also, like, you sit on the exco of YPO, and then you've also been mentoring like many different startups for many years now. And in the business world, like, That's
Yeah.
very big sister energy, right?
Yeah.
And is there ever that pressure for you to always have the right answers, or like to be that voice of trust and like to be the one really connecting the people around you back to who you're actually working for, which are your audience, your
course.
community, your consumers?
I always tend to refer back to experience rather than what I've learned in a university kind of setup. So whenever I have weekly mentoring calls with a lot of startups that are some are in Sri Lanka, some are in Pakistan, some are in India. So all of these, some of them are the products are just amazing. They just need to fine tune their story, and I see myself in them. I think that's why I connect with them so well, and I've given them my WhatsApp number, and even when they're having after a meeting, they'll call me and say, hey, this, we just had a very tumultuous meeting, and this is what happened. And I'm always happy to kind of bounce back on my experience and say, if when this happened in my meeting, this is how I navigated it. And these startups really resonate with experience rather than someone who's not been through it and just read about it or learned about it in a textbook and then kind of preaches. They can immediately tell the difference when you're coming from experience versus coming from a textbook. And that's how I have had the privilege of watching these startups really blossom. But the way I pick them is I see if the product is viable first, and if there are any cracks where I can actually put in my 2 cents. And it's been the way they receive feedback from me, because I'm in the trenches with them. And it's not like I'm above these problems that we're having. I'm facing the exact same problems, and this is how I solved it. And within a platform like YPO, for that, I'm on the Exco, which is a huge responsibility, because the position I have is brand positioning with them, the way they show up in the world and in the media, and how they navigate not being too out there, because it's still supposed to be a community that's under the radar.
Yep.
So we have to navigate that storytelling in a very different kind of way. But I get so much takeaway from watching these CEOs work how they work, because they come from a very different mindset. Their growth mindset is very different. The way they communicate is different, but they still need the fine tuning of a marketing experienced person. But there's a lot of take home value from being on these boards and these startups. I get as much out of this than they get as well.
Yeah. Well, speaking of big sister energy in the business world, Rahat, you've recently been appointed editorial director for Beyond the Boardroom, which focuses on leadership that's bold, dynamic, and deeply connected. I lifted that off the website. But that sounds like it came from somewhere very specifically in your brain. Tell us about your vision for it and why only you could do the job.
Well, Beyond the Boardroom, so it's 51 days into its journey at the moment, as of today. But it's actually was born from the notion of business and culture intersecting. So there's a lot of talk of how culture is reshaping methodology, thinking, commercial models, all of that. But there's a lack of discipline in terms of explaining how that's actually occurring. And I think there's a misunderstanding that culture refers to trends that are fleeting and changing and moving. But actually culture is this underpinning of a resonance change in terms of behavior and how people are actually showing up, whether that's because of consumption, like things like Labubu, for example. That's a cultural movement. Why did it become so popular? I know some people say it's like the Beanie Babies of the 90s, right? And it's now making its kind of resurrection. But it's understanding what's the commercial model behind Labubu. Why are consumers going crazy for it? And there are wonderful publications that look at the essence of lifestyle and product and trends. And then there are wonderful publications that analyze business and look at the high stakes of it. But there are very few, if any, that at least I found in this region that intersect the two together. And to be really honest with you, this notion around leadership, it actually really comes from the people that I work with. So Bettina von Schlipper, who's the publisher at large of Vogue Singapore and also the co-founder of Beyond the Boardroom, she is the resonance of that leadership for me. And it's her vision actually around women in leadership in particular, because she has fought her way through so many different industries, including agency, including media. And we have a profound connection in the way in which we see the world because of being female leaders. So her vision is really to thread and bring people together under this notion of modernized leadership and what does it look like for the future. And this kind of leadership, I don't even want to say 2.0, I think we're at like 10.0 at this stage. But the boldness element is in the unapologeticness of wanting to say what we want to say about leadership and about culture and how the workplace is changing. Everyone's talking about the interruption of AI. It's an old topic almost now, funnily enough. But who's bringing, again, it's so funny, I keep saying the thread, but what is the thread that ties that all together? It's like, if there are massive cultural changes happening from a commercial model point of view, how is that resonating in the companies that are delivering against that, and who is leading that? If Labubu has become an overnight sensation, let's just say, call it that, although no brand is an overnight sensation really, but who had the vision to lead that, and how did they see the commercial potential for that? So we really want to unpack those elements, and that's where the focus on the leadership and culture comes in.
Yeah, and I think you're like actively trying to shift the conversation around all of this. So in a way, it's also like your editorial voice and your own instincts becomes a tool for cultural change, like in your own small way. And again, like so much opportunity, like so much depth in there. Have you ever thought of something that you would create that's entirely yours in the next phase of like your career?
This is kind of that, actually. This is that. I mean, as much as I'm the editorial director, I have full authority, vision, space, time to determine what this product looks like and how we move it forward. We talk about leadership. I think such a huge facet of leadership is entrusting people to take ownership of the things that you know that they're passionate about. And I have worked with all kinds of leaders in my career. When I started out with some very rigid people that I felt like I didn't connect with, that were very practical driven. I'm very passion driven. And I think I'm finally in a place that truly sees not just my talent, but sees my vision, my passion, and also my resilience in wanting to get to where I really want to go, not just personally, but as a community. And so this is distinctly mine in terms of editorial voice. And I feel immensely supported in driving home whatever I want from it, with the infrastructure that I get from being part of such a publication house as Media Publishers, where we have titles like Vogue and Robb Report. And so you're actually leaning on expertise. And I really feel like every entrepreneur, as I'm learning, goes through a phase where they're like, I'm an island and only I can see it and no one else will understand this. I'm sure you've been through this. But then you slowly realize, okay, I can reach out and I will not forget, like early on in the experience, I'd say early on, it's been 51 days, maybe at the 20-day mark, I will say that I was having this moment where I was very clearly overwhelmed by all the immense things that I wanted to achieve out of launching Beyond the Boardroom. And there was this really beautiful moment where Bettina actually sat me down and said, I need to know how I can help you, because I'm feeling like you think that no one's helping, like no one is available to help you, but we are here to help you. And I was stressing about how we're going to achieve something that felt very unfeasible to me. And then she actually said to me, this is not feasible, so I don't know how you think you're going to achieve. And it's like she unlocked this sort of fear inside of me that had been sitting, and I was afraid to reach out and say, I don't know if I can do this, because it's actually going to be a stain against my entire being and what I can bring to the table. When in reality, I actually came to realize, oh, okay, I'm supported in such a profound way. I don't know why I'm not leveraging this support. I don't know why I'm seeing it as a sign of my own incompetence if I want to lean on someone who's there for me to lean on for this exact reason. And that guidance has been the thing that has actually shaped what I feel has been the success of the platform so far, because now I'm surrounded by 3 amazing people in management that I work with who at any point in time, including at 9:00 this morning, sat together with me to say, how do we make this better? How do we make this bigger? So I think you have to kind of remember it's yours, but it's not, no team, no person, even if you're an individual speaker, even if you're a celebrity, you are not on your own. You are part of a build.
Yeah.
Remember.
So true. I think isolation is something that people assume that you have to isolate yourself if you're an entrepreneur or a startup founder. But you said words like support and leaning in, and all of these tools are available. They're right, around you, and it's just up to us to kind of take that initiative.
Yeah.
Yeah, and our own like internal voice as a leader is always the harshest. Like we are our biggest like critiques. When you are your own leader now as a founder of an independent business, you're creating literally something from nothing, right? So how do you distinguish between this is what the market wants and this is what is trendy versus this is what I, Sabina, know actually what women need?
Good question, actually. So we're in the middle of a pivot right now within Baréskin as well. So I feel like this question is very timely. So when the women started off the journey with me, now we're all going into the phase where our kids are teenagers. We're going through perimenopause. We're going through like a lot of anti-aging products through with picking up when we're shopping. So I feel like I know what they want because that's what I need right now as well. And if you have followed the journey of your customers, you will also kind of know their rough age range and you preempt what they need before they know themselves. I think that's a sign of a good marketer or a good founder because you preempt what your customer needs even before they know what they need. And even if you're not talking about products for yourself, products for things that are happening around you. So my kids are having hormonal acne right now. So for us to come up with products that actually support the lifestyle changes that are happening around you. A lot of them are doing, things like high rocks and all of these F45 and high impact workouts. How does that affect your skin and how can we kind of intervene and come in? So having that thinking that you kind of step outside the box a bit and look at the bigger picture and see where are the cracks and where is the need for us to fill in these gaps, that kind of makes it a success because by the time they've thought about it and need it, it's right in front of them.
How do you think about, or how do you approach the difficult questions? Because approaching a pivot, like navigating a pivot, is never easy, right? It shows you how much the business has evolved, but also how much you as a person, your team, your community, what is that leadership style and like what is the communication style around that?
So for us, a lot of it is data driven. So if we look at the data of our per click, our users that are coming onto our website, we look at the age range, we look at, even when we have team meetings, we're sitting and talking about what is the data like? Where are our followers on Instagram? Which countries are they from? What seasons are they on? What's the age range, male versus female? Ethnicity also really is a huge thing when it comes to skincare. Yeah. So we have a lot of these big questions, but as long as you have data backing up the answers, we feel like it's a sure shot. Yes, we have made mistakes before where, we've kind of come up with products that really don't move the needle and we're like, hey, but the data sat well with this. What happened? And again, you have to be very agile and nimble to kind of pivot a little bit. But having data backed is really important. And now we're at an era where all of this data is available. Like every click that comes to you, you have immense data, like who, where, what, how long did they spend on your website? So with this pivot that we're doing, we're also relaunching our website. We're relaunching a lot of things given the audience that's coming to us. Because when I started Baréskin, I feel like it was very like just me. There was no data. It was just me following my gut feeling. And now we're sitting on this gold mine of data. And now we're like, okay, let's do things, a bit more pivoted towards what the audience is at right now.
Yeah.
So we're very excited. We have an investor on board now. Things are a lot more structured. It's less just me on this island that Rahat was talking about, and more like let's lean into the resources that are available. And even the way our new investor came on board, he's like, I've loved this product. I've used this product. I believe in this product, and I just want to invest. And it was something we were not looking to get into, but leaning into all of these supporting roles that we have around us is something that I have learned the hard way.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to wrap up really soon with some more personal questions. Well, to me, the both of you are incredibly successful people, entrepreneurs. Has this success made you trust your voice more? Or is it because of this success, because of what you've accomplished, that sometimes you second guess what you're about to say, what decisions you're about to make? Are the stakes higher now that you're more successful?
Gosh, success is very relative, isn't it? It's a very subjective term. And I think to anybody who says that success doesn't matter to them when they're using their voice, I think they're being disingenuous, because it does matter, because we're in, at least in media, if you are writing something and no one is reading it, then I would objectively say you're not very successful, because then you can just say that to yourself. But is the purpose of it to achieve maximum reach in terms of success? Not necessarily, because sometimes your goal is just to engage a certain type of community that is where you're most resonant, right? So the stakes are higher, 100%. I spoke earlier about the responsibility when you are on media platforms, for example. And it's interesting, when I was working with more prestigious brands, when I say prestigious in the sense of well-established, brands like Bureau, like Esquire, like Campaign, there is an inherent sense of responsibility that you're carrying the brand ambassadorship with you. And it's a reflection. Everything you say, the more senior you become, is a reflection of the brand. Yeah. And people have a hard time separating you out from the brand, because you become the face of it in many ways if you're the editor-in-chief, for example. And you do become conscientious. I come from a PR background, so I already start analyzing how things are going to be perceived, and, is it going to, optics-wise, is it going to land correctly with the people that we want it to land with? Which can be a little bit of a debilitating game sometimes, because then you kind of walk yourself out of saying things that you really do want to say at times. But the thing that I'm starting to realize is that there is a trade-off of honesty and of self-belief in this as well. There are moments, like in my prior role when I was at Campaign, where I would regularly go and say, I have this opinion, and I know we don't really speak a lot about opinions as such, but I would like to frame it in a way that kind of lends factual nuance to it. I would like to do some research around it. I would like to have a well-researched and based opinion, as opposed to just having an opinion for the sake of having an opinion, that's a whole separate topic about how I feel about how social media has democratized the opinion economy. But I feel the stakes are higher, but the stakes are also higher in that the further up you rise to be successful, the more you should also recognize that you have more of a responsibility to be honest about how you feel about things. Because if you're presenting a veneer to people in spite of having a platform, and then it comes to be that you do not actually agree with the things that you're endorsing, then that is where you lose the absolute trust of the audience that you're building. Similar to what Sabina was saying before, it's lost in a minute. It's gained in many, many years. So the stakes are higher to be more honest, just as much as the stakes are higher to protect. You have to balance the both.
Yeah. What I would add to that, no matter how successful you are or you get, and I've heard like large scale CEOs talk about it as well, the imposter syndrome is real. It doesn't matter how successful or how good of a day you have, that little thing will creep up on you. And what has kept me very real is having friends like Rahat, and mirrors that I have amongst my friends, where at 2 a.m. I could call Rahat and say, I don't know if this decision is the right one. And we would just talk it out. And that sense of trust and relief that you get after such a conversation, I know she's got my back, and I know she'd point it out if I say something that isn't very authentic to my brand or the pivot that we're making. So surrounding yourself with the right friends and the tribe when that imposter syndrome creeps in is super important.
Yeah. It goes both ways. I very much call her at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, I know
well. This. She's been there for pretty much all of the decisions I've made in the last 6 years. So,
yeah. And I mean, I think like finding your voice is not a one-time thing at all, right? Like it's a series of like awkward voice notes to your future self, and it comes from within. It also comes from outside. It comes from like the people that are around you. So any last advice for people who are looking for their voices, especially young impressionable people growing up, coming of age into social media era?
I would say that don't feel pressured to have a voice in the way that other people have it, because social media has shown us that anyone can pick up a camera and then suddenly have a platform, right? And there's also a unique pressure on young people today to feel like they have to have a voice. And having a voice doesn't only mean speaking in front of a camera, vocalizing, or even writing. You can have a voice by just being influential in your community. If you are someone who's deeply passionate about animals and you go and work in your animal shelter, you have a voice. I think we have created this culture where we allow people who are amplified to seem like they're the only influential people in the world, who are the only catalysts of change. We want everyone to become a Fortune 500 CEO. We want every single person to see themselves up on a billboard. Fame is not having a voice. That is not equivalent. You can have a voice and not be famous. There are very, very many influential people in the world who are changing the courses of people's lives on a daily basis. People in medicine, doctors and nurses have a voice. They change the healthcare system so that we benefit from that. Do we ever really hear about it on a daily basis? No, unless there's something really massive going on. So this conflation of voice and fame needs to be something that I would really separate, even for leaders today, because I see many, many leaders get in this trap of, I'm a really senior person, but I don't have a voice yet because I didn't have an article published about me. And I'm like, you have the ability to influence immense change in multi-million-dollar contexts. Yeah. That is your voice. Use that to affect positive outcomes for your employees, for the future of your business, to do work that contributes back to community. But don't chase a spotlight. That is, just because you have the light on you doesn't mean you have a voice.
True. Makes sense. Quick one from me. The question that you asked about when you saw your old content, what did you feel? It was that person, the younger version of myself. It really resonated, and hats off to her for being so real and vulnerable and naive and lost. And but that's how I was, and that's what resonated with people. So be truly authentic and be yourself, and consistency. I think if both of us, if we hadn't been consistent with our voice and putting ourselves out there, we wouldn't have reached where we have reached today. Consistency is very underrated, and I feel like if someone's looking to get there, to find their voice, be consistent in doing it.
Yeah, I wish like this was a 2-hour episode. Now we have to do a part 2 of like how to actually do it, right? Like we've done like the talking, we've set out the context.
Yeah. Now let's get into how to execute.
We can do a practical tips to finding your voice.
Absolutely, like make it a workshop, make it interactive. Well,
tools to use, apps to use.
Yeah, exactly. Make it clickbaity. Thank you both so much. This was such a great chat, and thanks for saying yes to me.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
This was such an enjoyable conversation. Thank you.
No, for real, you guys are really good.